So I was in the Sacred Circle yesterday that I host every month. It's a Zoom that's open for my Patreon members. And we had, it was such a beautiful, delicious conversation. And in it, we talked a lot about our shared experience of massive anxiety this year. Like, there were several people in the conversation who either had had their first panic attacks during this year, or they hadn't had panic attacks in a long time and were newly having them again this year. And so we talked a lot about the intensity of the energies and just basically like the frequency of our planet is raising so quickly and so high that any amount of density or resistance or us living out of our cultural conditioning instead of coming from our true nature, any of those divergences are becoming harder and harder and harder to withstand because of the way the frequency of the planet is rising. And so somebody asked a very honest and a very logical question, which is, can you tell us when, like, kind of how much longer do I need to hold on? Because this intensity, like, okay, I get it. It's happening for everybody, and that kind of helps me feel a little bit better. But at the same time, like, I don't know how much more of this I can take. So is there like an end point coming? Is there a time when, the temperature is gonna not be boiling hot here? Not physically, more metaphorically, emotionally speaking. And as I've sat with that question of like, where is the end point of this journey of intensity, this journey of kind of like ratcheted up anxiety? Where's the end point? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? How do I get how do I get to a place where it doesn't feel quite so hard? And I'm having a bit of a reflection here this morning that I wanted to share around this quote unquote end point. And the original question was kind of phrased as far as like for the collective, astrologically speaking, like when are the planets going to do something different so that then we can all feel better? And I gave an honest answer in the moment, which is basically that I think the frequency of the planet is only going to continue to get higher, and the more you're diverging from your true nature, that's only going to get harder and harder and harder for your physical body to handle. And personally, I don't see an end point in terms of the planets and the frequencies of the planet. It's not going to come back down to like make us more comfortable. We're going to have to rise to meet it. And that is the end point that does exist, is inside of each of us. We each are operating with our own frequency, and the ride is really, really rough when our normal frequency is lower than the frequency of the planet around us. It's a bumpy ride at that place, as opposed to if you are matching or even above the frequency of the planet, you're essentially floating. And at that point, like, you're buoyant and you aren't experiencing the same turbulence. And notice the frequency of the planet like is completely outside of our control, but the frequency of ourselves is 100% internally within us and therefore inside of our own control. Basically, like, the one thing that we have access to controlling in this whole universe is ourselves. And that may not include the general energy that we soak up from the world around us, right? That's where the planet's frequency elevating and like basically kind of asking each of us to up our own frequency along the way, just so we can kind of keep pace with the planet. Otherwise, it's amping up the suffering. It's amping up the panic attacks. That's turbulence of existing at a lower frequency than where the planet currently is. This is my own personal understanding, how I intuitively relate to these concepts. But this frequency inside of ourselves, I basically see it as this heart opening that is the end point. When your heart opens to, I'm going to say, loving yourself, like feeling connected to the divinity that you are, and identifying with that divine part of yourself, that God self, that inner being, that soul part of who you are. When you're identifying with that, there is no more suffering. There is no more problem at that point, because you are at home within yourself. And again, when you're merged with source energy is pure positive energy. So we're talking about a really high frequency happening in order to merge with your soul and open your heart to unconditionally love yourself. That is a tremendous feat of an enormous amount of healing, typically, that has to go on before you like yourself well enough to feel like you deserve to be loved unconditionally. That takes some doing, takes some practicing of believing in your own worthiness for unconditional source energy love. You have it all the time, and it is the end of each and every individual's suffering. But nothing that goes on in the physical external circumstance can open that door, other than the suffering of the physical becoming so great that the only option left is to surrender what's going on in the physical and point your attention towards your inner landscape. And sometimes shit really has to hit the fan. We have to lose a good chunk of the control we thought we had. We never had it. We thought we did. And then that gets taken away. And in that rebalancing, in that, being off balance because kind of that security blanket got taken away. Again, when you don't have the physical security blanket to rely on, you are more likely, it's just a fact, you're more likely to look for it inside yourself when you don't have the physical security and comfort happening in the outside world. So there are lots of things going on astrologically that are pushing us out of finding our physical security in the physical world. The way that it is becoming more and more uncomfortable to live out our cultural conditioning, that is only going to continue until we surrender into our true nature, which is to say divine unconditional love. And I'll maybe leave it here. A lot of people, especially like in the spiritual community, it's such a blessing that so many people are participating and like awake and wanting to be, feeling better and doing better in the world. And that's like truly inspirational. And so there's a lot of us out there that are reaching for this idea, this ideal of practicing universal love and compassion. And that sounds really great, kind of on the surface, until you realize that loving everything in the universe except yourself, having compassion for everything in the universe but not you, as Elizabeth Gilbert puts it, that's kind of a narcissistic viewpoint. To feel like everybody in the world deserves mercy and love and compassion, but you don't. So there's a process of folding ourselves into the universe, and we eliminate the suffering of the world by figuring out how to open this door within our own heart and connect with our own source of universal love and compassion that first and foremost will fill us up before we're able to give it to anyone